Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and today we're going to be checking out the first two figures in the brand new Sectaurs, Warriors of Symbion toy line from the folks over at Nacelle. I've been pretty excited about this relaunch of one of my favorite semi-obscure retro toy lines from the 1980s, and the line kicks off with the two figures that we have here in front of us today. We've got Prince Dargon, and we've got Stellara, which is really exciting because she was never released in the original toy line. She was prototyped, but never actually came out. So it's really cool that they are including her in the first wave to sort of give fans of this line a figure that we've never had before. Another thing I like about these is they have a very vintage look to them. They still look almost like they would fit in with the original toy line. So we're definitely going to do some comparisons in the video today so we can see how they measure up to those original figures and what things are different as far as articulation and all of that goes. You can see the card backs they come on are really nice. These are pretty big figures, so these are like really large, oversized card backs. One of the things I wanted to talk about here is that it's hard to actually stand them up because they don't have sort of that little piece at the bottom of the blister bubble to keep it so that it stands up straight if you're going to plan on standing these on a shelf or anything like that. So I had to lean these just for this particular shot right here. Aside from that, though, I do think the card backs are beautiful. They're bright, they're colorful. Sectaurs logo across the top. You can fully see the figures and all of their weapons. Also, the card backs are super sturdy, which is something else that I appreciate. There we go. I'm turning them around here. They are not standing up well, but I wanted to give you guys a shot of the backs here. So this has just got images of the figures with the cross-sell at the bottom there, but also gives us some information on the figures. So, packaging, pretty cool, but let's go ahead and open these guys up so we can get a closer look at the figures within. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at our new Sectaurs outside of the packaging here. Bringing in the tape measure, you can see that the figures are at about 6.5 inches tall. The antenna coming off their head definitely pushes them up to 7 inches, but the tops of their heads are right at about 6.5 inches tall. So they're about the exact same scale as the vintage Sectaurs toy line. And looking at these guys, even as I said in the packaging, they look very vintage, but there is some added articulation that the vintage toys did not have, so we will go over that right now. I'm actually going to move Stellara off to the side. Let's go ahead and focus first up on Prince Dargon. So colors and everything actually look really nice on this guy. I think the paint deco looks good. He's bright. The blues are vibrant. You can see there's some shading there in the chest. Very similar to the vintage. The vintage had quite a bit of shading on it, which you'll see in our comparison times a little bit later. But looking at this guy, it's almost easy to mistake him for a vintage Sectaurs Prince Dargon. Now, there are some differences. The overall sculpting in the head does look really good, though I will say it's a little on the soft side, and again, comparisons are really going to make that stand out. But I do still think it looks nice. All the paint is done very cleanly. I do like the antennas have they're like molded in like this metallic-y gold color. You can see there's a little bit of pliability to them up there. He is wearing a separate belt, which I don't know if actually it's very, very rigid plastic on there. Might even be glued in place. It's not really budging at all, and maybe that's for the better. And then the articulation, like I said, it is still very vintage in overall feel, but it is a little bit different. So the head, you can see it just goes side to side there at the neck. Doesn't really have any other range of motion other than that. The shoulders, you can see, have the ball joints there, the little hinges. So the arms can go outwards, move forwards and backwards. Good range of motion at the shoulders there. You do have elbow bends, which looks like it's a double elbow because it looks like we've got a bend here just under the bicep, but then again up here under the glove, possibly, because you can see, look at that, how it's got a really good range of motion there. It does also swivel there at the elbow. and then the wrists will just swivel there as well. As far as the torso goes, there's nothing actually in the torso, no ab crunch or anything like that. You just get the swivel at the waist. And then the thighs are ball jointed and they are very tight. Now, they're actually done similar to the vintage toys. They were also very much done this way. Do you hear all that squeaking around? That's how tight those ball joints are there. So very tight joints at the thighs, but the legs can go forwards and backwards, side to side. No other articulation in the thigh, so you can see there's no thigh cut or anything like that. Their knees are double jointed. I will say they look a bit odd when they are bent, and part of that I think is because the sculpt of the boots gets broken up, because you can see the top portion of the boot is part of that knee sculpt. So when you bend the knee on the bottom part of the joint, the boot like sticks to the knee, and then you've got this broken sculpt there, which is always a bit strange. No swivels at the boot, so the legs basically will just stay completely straight, and then the ankles, man, the ankle joints are real tight. Oh, look at that. So pops out a socket to show you that it's just a ball joint. I'm actually glad that happened so that we can see what the joint looks like. I actually put a lot of pressure to make it do that. There you go. It snaps in place really good. So it's like a ball joint. So really you're just going to get the swiveling out of it. You're going to get it to roll around. So there's no hinge joints. So the articulation is improved over the vintage, because the vintage did not have any articulation in the elbows. It just had single joints at the knees, but otherwise it is still a very retro feeling figure as far as that articulation goes. I don't think you're going to get a lot of dynamic poses specifically because the legs are missing a lot of the joints that I think a lot of modern action figures have, especially with the ankles and the boot cut and everything like that. I would almost equate these to something very similar to Masters of the Universe Origins, where the figure itself still has a very vintage look and a very vintage feel, just with a little bit of added articulation there. So I think it's going to appease some fans. I think there might be some modern action figure fans that won't like that as much. You're not going to get like Marvel Legends style articulation out of these particular figures. Now, they do still feel very sturdy. I think overall they're standing real solid. The joints are tight. The figure itself, the quality feels really good. And we've got a lot of accessories going on here with each of these figures as well. So first of all, Prince Dargon does have the holstered pistols, very similar to that of the vintage. You can see these are just both molded in like a metallic-y gold plastic there. The hands are all molded the same, where there's like no trigger finger or anything like that sculpted on the hands, but he does get a good solid grip, so he can hold the weapons really good, which is very nice. It might look a little weird holding some of the weapons, but for the most part, this is just fine. I do really like that we have the holsters, so we can put those on his hips there when not in use, because in addition to that, we do also have this really strange looking larger blaster gun there, which you can hold in his hand. We've also got the sword, which was my preference always for Prince Dargon. And we've also got a shield as well. You can see it's just got like a very classic style handle on the backside, so we can hold on to that. There we go. He's a little loose fitting in his hand there, but there we go. I got it. So yeah, so that is our Prince Dargon. Let me go ahead and bring in Stellara. Now, Stellara, I think, is the one that a lot of Sectaurs fans are going to be the most excited about because, as I mentioned earlier, she's an unreleased figure from the original toy line. One of the things I love about this figure are the colors. She is beautiful. The blues and purples that are in her armor and the way they're so reflective and metallic. She is a gorgeous looking action figure. And again, very vintage look to the overall sculpt, which I like quite a bit. Articulation is the same that we had for Dargon over there. The knees feel even a little worse on her because it just breaks that sculpt of that boot, where you can see her skin under the knee there. Yeah, so the knees, I'm not sure I love the knees, but otherwise I think pretty decent. Now, she comes with a few accessories of her own. She does have this very small dagger there. She's also got a smaller version of the shield, which is pretty cool. You can see she's got a holster on her hip. I believe that's for the dagger, though I will say that it fits a little loose in there, like it falls out a bit easy. But you also notice on her back there, she's got this cool little Almost looks like a sawed-off shotgun that holsters on the back there. Though because of the lack of articulation in the wrists, no hinge joints or anything, she does hold it a little strange, and her arm articulation prevents her from getting two-handed poses. But it is still pretty cool. I like that we can holster it on her back. Did you see how that dagger just fell out of the holster? That's what I was talking about just a little bit ago. So I do think overall very nice looking action figures. But again, very vintage feeling. So I think that's going to be, a positive or a negative, really depending on what type of action figure you specifically are looking for with the Sectaurs reboot. With that being said, I think this is a great time for comparison time, and I want to start by comparing the new Prince Dargon with the vintage Prince Dargon. We'll get those two standing side by side. This is just the Dargon I had in my personal collection. He's in a bit of rough shape, and he's certainly not complete. But when you look at these two standing side by side, there's one thing that stands out. First of all, the new ones, they're a little bit smaller. And it's not necessarily that the scale is different, but the overall stature is just a little smaller than the vintage figures. I don't think it's too bad in that you couldn't mix these in with your vintage figures, but standing directly side by side, I think you could really see it with Prince Dargon here. The other thing I kind of want to look at is the sculpting in the head. I mentioned that the sculpting on the new ones was a bit on the softer side. You can really see that when comparing the head sculpts of the vintage figure there. It just has a little bit more to the overall detailing in there. You can even see it in the sculpted medallion on his necklace. It stands out just a little bit more on the vintage one. The other thing I would like to do is just kind of show these standing alongside a group of vintage figures, especially with Stellara. I feel like there's going to be a lot of Sectaurs fans who might just want to buy her to fit her in with some of those vintage figures. Here, let's replace this Dargon with another Dargon from the vintage line. Just bring in some vintage figures here just to stand them around Stellara so you can see what she looks like with them. Like I said, I do think that these fit in really nicely with the vintage line, which I don't know if that's exactly what Nacelle was going for. I think that's probably what the intent was sort of just a modernized version a little bit, but they still work with your vintage Sectaurs figures. That's definitely the feeling I'm getting when looking at these figures here. I think Stellara looks pretty great standing with the vintage toys. Another thing I definitely wanted to try is the vintage ride-on bugs here. So yeah, we got our dragon flyer. Mine is missing the wings, unfortunately. I feel like everybody's is missing the wings, but this is just one I've had in my personal collection for a long time. But just bringing in the new Prince Dargon, you can see that he fits perfectly on the saddle. He fits in there nice and tight, just like the vintage one. He looks good on there. So these guys definitely do fit in perfectly with the vintage bugs. Now, bugs are a big part of the Sectaurs line. So I will say one of the things I'm a bit bummed about is that the figures didn't come with a pack-in bug like this little guy that I'm holding right here, because the vintage ones would have come with these little pack-in little buddies here. I definitely think that's something that's missing from the new ones. I would have liked to see that. But I also do hope that there are some plans for some ride-on bugs or more bugs in the line, since that does feel like such a part of the Sectaurs brand. So there you go, my friends. There is a look at the brand new Sectaurs Prince Dargon and Stellara from Nacelle Toy Company. I want to give a very special thanks to Nacelle because they were the ones who provided these figures for the purposes of this review. Overall, I do think these are really nice figures. I personally have always loved the original Sectaurs line. I was excited to see these come back, and I'm always excited to get unreleased characters to kind of fit in with my vintage toys. Now, I don't know what you were expecting. So if you were somebody who was expecting a little bit more articulation, a little bit more detailing and not so vintage, maybe these aren't for you. But if you love that kind of modern vintage action figure, I think they did a pretty nice job of these. I would have just loved to see a few more accessories like those pack-in bugs. Maybe some different engineering on the knees. The knees just feel a little off to me with those double joints. But otherwise, I still think these are pretty solid figures. I'm excited to see where this goes, what kind of Sectaurs are coming down the pipeline. These are available at online shops right now, so if you're interested, happy hunting, my friends, and until next time.